Yes, since the beginning of 2022, Nigerians have been cutting down on their spending month after month as rising inflation depleted their earnings. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria witnessed a significant increase in the inflation rate, which rose from 24.08% in July of this year to 25.8% in August. The proverbial cut your coat according to your fabric might now be the mantra many will live by as the festive season approaches. This means that Nigerians will have to pay even more for food items, transport fare, gas, and other energy sources. This is the crux of our discussion today. All right, joining us via Zoom from Abuja is a financial expert, Olusegun Elemo. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. Happy to join.
Right. This matter of talking about our public debt and inflation hitting 25.8% in August is a conversation that a majority of Nigerians do not want to have, especially the attendant impact on their sources of income, their earnings, and their lives in general. But help us understand what these recent figures we are seeing from the Debt Management Office and the numbers with regards to our inflation means to an average Nigerian.
Yeah, thank you for the question. For the figures with the numbers coming from the Debt Management Office, I think is simple because I mean, we had a case before this administration came in. It was glaring that the Apex Bank had, provided ways and means to the tune of more than 22 trillion to the federal government. So bringing that number into the total debt stock certainly, was going to push up, a debt portfolio. And again, the current government also, is exploring, or has explored, certain borrowings, first from the World Bank, financing the palliatives, for instance, to cushion the effect of removal of petroleum subsidy. And of course, a few others, we don't know the details yet. But I know that they're exploring, some borrowings also to augment what our revenue profile currently looks like. Also, the issue of the some contractors that the federal government was owing before now, so had to provide promissory notes to those contractors. All of those debts, including the debts for all the 36 states as well, because it's important that we don't just only focus on the federal government when we're talking about the total debt stock of the country. It includes the debt of the federal government as well as the subnational. So all of that put together is what the DMO is now saying that has hit more than 87 trillion. And that's a push up from what we were as at the end of Q1 2023. It's something concerning. We need to look at it. It's unsustainable given our current revenue profile. We're still doing, or we're likely to do about 73 to 75% debt to revenue by the end of 2023. And that's certainly not something that is palatable. And we need to, look at it. In looking at it and in attending to it, we need to be more fiscally responsible, both at the federal level and at subnational. The federal government will need to negotiate with subnational governments and make them understand that they need to cut down on borrowings, both domestically and externally. So that's given the picture of what the DMO is saying about our total debt stock. On the flip side of it is what you mentioned about the inflation numbers. It's not surprising, really, that the inflation numbers rose from where we were the last time. Um, the subsidy on petroleum products have been taken out. That impacted on commodity prices, on cost of living, and all of that. Also, the foreign exchange unification, even though it's really not unified in real terms when you go to the market. But then government said it wanted to unify the foreign exchange rate and ensure that the gap between the official window and the parallel market is closed. So that, of course, put pressure on the naira as well. And then because we are largely import dependent, and it's a sorry situation for us as a country, as such, commodity prices will definitely respond to such policies. And it has responded, and that's what we're seeing from the inflation numbers coming from the National Bureau of Statistics. But beyond the removal of subsidy on petroleum products and the impact of unification of the foreign exchange is also the issue of political instability within the region, the sub-region, really. Recall that recently we had the coup in Niger Republic, and these are countries that share very close borders with Nigeria. In fact, trade ties with such countries very crucial to what's happening locally here. So when you have such political instability, it certainly will affect some commodities that come from those borders, and it will impact prices locally.
Right.
And those are some of the issues that we're currently seeing.
Right. So you talked about the naira, which has, really weakened against the dollar, and we may argue all we can that we should consume local content rather than working on importation, because importing some of the raw materials that we use also affects the naira. But some of these raw materials are not actually sourced from within Nigeria, so we can't really extricate Nigeria from the global community. But then, what do you think can be done to ensure that the naira is stabilized? You talked about the unification of the interest, of the foreign exchange.
Right.
So what do you think can be done to expedite this action on the to take the matter on the naira?
Well, I think it's to focus on the things that are putting pressure on the naira. First is the issue of petroleum products importation. We need to address that. And let me quickly say that it is also sad that even after months after the commissioning of the Dangote refinery, we still haven't seen anything regarding production. We need to be more responsible in this country. When we say we are commissioning something, Nigerians, will expect to see that in the next couple of days or weeks, production will commence. So if that had happened, it would have limited pressure on our currency with regards to importation of petroleum products. Yes, I understand that the federal government is also working on Port Harcourt refinery and Kaduna, I think. The earlier those refineries come on stream and start producing, the easier it is to limit the pressure on the naira. Also, I was listening to the Honorable Minister of Works a few days ago, and we understand that road contractors are also importing bitumen, for road construction. And he's saying that as a way to limit the pressure on local currency, that he would revert to concrete technology so that we can limit how much of importation we do on bitumen, because bitumen prices also respond to crude oil price at the international market. All of these are putting pressure on naira. Yes, we can talk about education tourism. Recently, the United Kingdom adjusted the price for visitors visa and student visa. Yes, and all of that impacts on local currency as well. Of course, there is the issue of health tourism. So we just need to look at what are those things that are gulping, effects in terms of. But then there are some things we can control. I mean, we aren't producing as much as we should of things that we consume here, and we need to really look at it. And I believe perhaps the policy of the federal government now to fund, 75 big businesses. I think the federal government is looking at providing 1 billion naira each to those 75 manufacturing, entities. Perhaps that will help, with local production for consumption, and then limit the pressure on local currency.
Right. I want to take you back to something you mentioned earlier. I want you to expatiate on that. You talked about fiscal responsibility, or being responsible when it comes to the matters of our fiscal policy. Could you expatiate on that? You were saying states should look into that, so to speak, but I need you to expatiate on what you mean by that.
Well, it's to say that when we have this kind of fiscal crisis on our hands, we need to spend on things that matter, things that can reflect growth, things that enhances development, things that improves truly the lives of the people. And when you look at how we're currently spending both at national and subnational level, it begs for caution that governments at federal and states, we need to really prioritize spending in development areas, for instance, in education, in health, and limit recurrent expenditure focused on capital. Just recently, I was looking at the budget implementation report of the federal government for Q1 for Q, I think it was Q2 or Q3 2022, and you could see the disparities, huge disparities between recurrent spending and capital spending. That is not going to get us anywhere. It's going to appear like a drop in the ocean. And we need to do more than we're currently doing. It will also mean that we need to cut down on, on hiring, aides that are not contributing value in governance. Let me say this, that the way governance work, especially in a democracy, every of the wheel of governance are complementary, to driving growth. Imagine if you have a car and then you have a flat tire in one of your 4 tires. How do you drive that kind of vehicle? How do you even move it? It's going to be very difficult and challenging. That's what we're seeing right now. When you have, you can have reforms around taxes and fiscal policy reforms and all of that. But if you don't also address other areas, that require attention, with, for instance, how we are spending, what we're spending on, I also, recently, heard the Minister of Works again, saying that the way our contracting is done from the budgeting stage is not also healthy for development. Those are areas that we need to look at and ensure that we become more responsible in that area. And again, I saw, when you were, reviewing the papers, the front page of the Daily Trust, talking about the absence of the Auditor General for the Federation and how that has stalled the audit of MDS. Again, we talk about public accountability. That's also another wheel of governance. If you don't attend to it, we really can't, move, governance forward.
Right. The labor unions have been threatening to go on strike, and one of their demands is the fact that they are negotiating higher wages for their members. Even the president has also, showed the body language to work on this. But then the problem there that I'm thinking is, it sounds so good, but don't you feel that this can put upward pressure on the fact that on prices, because businesses may pass those labor costs onto consumers, and in effect not still addressing this inflationary problems we're faced with now?
Absolutely. But to say that in reality, the subsidy shouldn't have been taken out before adjusting wages. So again, the federal government has to be responsible, but not just the federal government, even the state governments have to be responsible. Ordinarily, you would have had this negotiation before you remove subsidy. But I mean, you've put the horse before the cart. Or the cart before the horse, whichever way you look at it. The subsidy has been taken out. Now, you need to accelerate this negotiation with the labor unions. And again, I understand that the federal government is being careful to see how, for instance, if you adjust wages, how will that impact on inflation? From which source are you really going to provide the funding for the wage increase? All of that, you know, and then the impact it will have on the currency as well. When you pump money into the system, is going to further devalue the currency. So I think from the monetary policy angle and the fiscal policy authorities, they are looking at, you know, the implication of accelerating the wage increase negotiation with the labor unions. But the truth is that people are suffering, Nigerians are suffering, and you saw what happened in those states. I mean, you played it on your platform this morning. So it will be very responsible on the part of governments, both at the national and subnational level, to see how this can quickly be taken forward and in the negotiation on the new minimum wage. Because really, the palliatives aren't getting to everyone. The only way every Nigerian can get, you know, some form of relief right now is through this minimum wage. Once it's adjusted, then the market responds and every player in the system also take from what has been provided by the government.
Interesting. Now, in its debt sustainability analysis report of 2022, the DMO said that, one, that the federal government's projected revenue of 10 trillion naira for 2023 could not support fresh borrowing. Where does that leave us?
It just means that we need to up our revenue targets, and not just the targets, really. I mean, the inflows itself. We need to really up it. I think the DMO is suggesting that we need to do something around 15 trillion to be able to land at a sustainable point, at least that can accommodate the kind of borrowings that we've taken and we're hoping to take in the medium and the long term. Yes, we need to look at production of crude oil. And I believe that the federal government is doing something significant in curtailing crude oil thefts in the region with which we're sourcing the product. So we need to really look at that. And all the stakeholders need to cooperate with the federal government in ensuring that we're able to up the production from the current level that we're in, so that we can take advantage of the rise in prices of the crude oil in the international market. It really doesn't make sense that Nigeria, as big as we are in terms of production of crude oil, we aren't able to take advantage of what's currently happening. Yes, we're not happy with the Russian and Ukraine war, but the reality is on us, and we need to take advantage of it. But then also, the non-oil sector, we need to improve on what we're doing currently. And I hope that we carefully implement the policies of the federal government targeting non-oil sectors so that we can, at least improve revenue inflows from those sectors as well.
Right. Talking about policies, the central bank, for instance, has a significant influence on inflation through their control of interest rates as regards, and the money supply. Now that we'll be having a new CBN governor, if it's still through the Senate confirmation, what kind of monetary policies do you think is needed to be brought forth to address, to mitigate this, these challenges or the impact, and to further address these challenges we've identified so far?
One thing, let me say a few things. The first and foremost is for the new central bank governor to be responsible. Yes, I know that there's been adjustments to the limits on the ways and means that the federal government and the Apex Bank can provide to the federal government. Sadly, that had to be adjusted, after there's been an abuse of that legal provision. But it's to say that the new central bank governor and is someone that has, high pedigree, and he's done so much for himself, both in public service and in the private sector. I believe that he will be responsible and stay within the limits of the provisions of the law. When that is done, the governor will need to look at the money supply in the system. Currently, I don't support the kind of supply system that we currently have. I don't believe that you should have access to liquidity over the counter, and I've said it over and over again. There are many of these transactions that can be done on digital platform. You don't need to go to a bank and have to withdraw 20 million, 50 million, 100 million over the counter. It's not sustainable for our economy. We need to digitize all of these processes so that we can limit the amount of cash that is moving around the streets. Also, the Bureau de Exchange operators, the Apex Bank governor, we need to look at regulating that system. I also have suggested over and over again that what is currently happening in that window is irresponsible. We need to, whether we're going to have super BDCs that can now accommodate the small scale operators, but then we need to hold them accountable and we need to be serious about it. Other than that, we can't deal with the pressure that we're currently faced with coming from the Bureau de Exchange operators. So those are few things. Like I said, the bank governor will need to be more responsible than what we previously had. We need to curtail, liquidity in the system that is putting pressure on the economy, and we'll also need to look at the Bureau de Exchange operators and ensure that they become more responsible and accountable to government.
Mm. All right. It's interesting to know that responsibility and accountability are two key issues that you have mentioned or you have harped on with regards to this matter. But one quick question. The president has said, or he expressed, that his administration will look at breaking the reliance on borrowing. I am wondering where you think, if that is possible, and where you think that the low-hanging fruits he can quickly address in a few seconds.
Well, it's to up production. If you are going to not look at borrowings, then you need to have up production. When you up production, then you're able to lift people up in terms of their the income that comes into their pocket, into their bank accounts and all of that, and then you can tax it. I think that's what the president is talking about. When you up production, then people can earn more, and then you can tax it.
All right, we'll leave the conversation here now. Olusegun Elemo, financial expert, thank you for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.